This is pretty crazy. Smirconish, can we play this? I just found this like sort of fascinating. I can understand why people don't want to champion someone who murdered somebody, because I think it's antisocial to murder people. I think it's wrong.
Bold.
And I don't want to go out on a limb here, but I think that one could, look at the reaction of other people and their anger and see there's obviously a seething anger towards this industry. Take note of that. It is always not always a tragedy when people die. I mean, look, I said this when Scalia died. Scalia might have been a nice dad, might have been a nice husband, might have been a nice uncle or cousin, or, was good to the people that he shot in the face with a gun, whatever.
Cool hunting partner.
Cool hunting partner. My perspective on this is that we judge somebody, I judge somebody. If I know them through their public persona, I judge them through their public persona and for what is known in public. And, I can understand why people are not terribly sympathetic about that CEO dying. I'm sure it must be difficult for his family. But that's also different from saying that this person should be considered some type of saint. We have people die in this country every day. We had 2 people die yesterday, or 3 people die yesterday because of a shooting. We have thousands of people dying at the hands of our weapons on a daily basis around the world, obviously in Gaza and whatnot. And there's no memorials to them. What is going on with this guy?
I slowed my gait as I passed a side entrance to the Hilton Hotel, realizing that this was the same day, in the same early morning hour, in the precise location where 1 week prior, a 50-year-old father of 2 was assassinated. But something was missing. Any sign whatsoever of the tragedy that occurred right here and which has captivated the nation. We've all seen the crime scene that's been shown many times in the media. There it is. But a week later, here's what was left. A lone piece of NYPD crime tape affixed to a barrier. No memorial of the kind that often appears spontaneously after a similar tragedy. Like when John Lennon was murdered in New York City in 1980.
Wait a second.
32-year-old.
Wait a second. Wait a second. This CEO of this healthcare company, incidentally, under investigation for insider trading, but insider trading, incidentally, that broke the hundreds of thousands of people's pensions, incidentally.
Imagine all of the people getting gouged by health insurers. What is going on? He wants a vigil for the CEO?
Can't you come up with somebody different than one of the all time, when he died in 1980, incidentally, John Lennon was one of the biggest rock stars, but also perceived to be a movement of people.
He talked about having no possessions. He's an anti-materialistic, specifically at the end of his life. That song, Imagine, is about...
Even if it was Elvis. Even if it was Elvis.
I know. But that example of, somebody who was... there were a lot of problems with John Lennon as a person in many ways, but as specifically towards the end of his life, he was an anti-war activist who also was talking about the ills of capitalism as well.
Imagine there's no copays.
Yeah.
But to use that as your first example, first of all, there was a kid killed that day. I think another kid killed that day in the city.
People on bikes get killed all the time.
Just the fact, listen, the only reason why people paid attention to this is because there was video of an assassination in a way that we don't usually see. But there are plenty of times where you have killings that take place where there is video. It's just not somebody who's super rich. I can understand why there was so much news coverage of it because it was titillating. But the idea that there's no memorial there, are you kidding me? It would make more sense for this guy to go, I think this is proof that his family didn't care for him. They didn't put a wreath there.
The hotel's like doing the Jonah Hill, like, cut it out speech. Like, we don't want actually to remind all our guests that somebody was just assassinated outside
Yeah,
our hotel.
that might be
Why
why.
isn't the hotel doing a huge shrine to this guy? But this is just bizarre. I mean, go ahead.
He's auditioning.
John Lennon was murdered in New York City in 1980. Or when 32-year-old Heather Heyer was run down in Charlottesville, Virginia. George Floyd's murder in Minneapolis. The spot in Kenosha, Wisconsin, where Joseph Rosenbaum and Anthony Huber were shot and killed by Kyle Rittenhouse.
Pause it for a second.
Crowds
Now, you
breathe-
see where he's done here, right? You see what's going on here. He starts off with John Lennon, a massive sort of like iconic figure. Not, I mean, his politics are obviously the left, but he was not, 1980. I mean, the politics weren't where they are today. He was just a famous guy, peace guy, but sort of like hippie, just like an avatar of a generation. But then Smirkanish then sort of like layers in all these woke people were killed and we paid attention to them, and somebody put flowers there.
Yeah, even Nancy Pelosi and other leaders knelt down in kente cloth to commemorate the black men in this country who have been lost to police violence. Why is no one kneeling down, draped in denied claims from United Healthcare in front of the Hilton Hotel?
But you see what he's doing here, which is so nefarious, it seems to me, is that it's not like, why aren't we noticing this? It's like, why do we spend so much time noticing someone who was, these other sort of wokey people? That's the problem.
You know why he may not have a vigil? It's in part because his family is still going to be multi-millionaires because he was a healthcare CEO, and they can probably afford a funeral service. The reason there are vigils on the streets for certain people that were killed by, say, a right-wing vigilante or by a cop that eventually went to jail is because they are less powerful. They are not multi-millionaires in our society.
It's community response to police brutality, too.
This is when communities come together to wrap their arms around people who need to have their arms wrapped around, not a billionaire freak, or millionaire freak who made his money basically on gouging people in a for-profit business when they were in their most desperate needs.
But he's also, let me just say this again, with the Lennon thing. You could argue Lennon was a movement figure, but not really. I mean, he was a very popular icon, and I think he meant different things to different people.
Right.
A vision of whatever, America, and maybe the idea of peace, and that could be different, or the world that could be different. But all these other people that he's citing were killed as in the context of a larger narrative. And what is the narrative that we're supposed to be getting from this? What he is doing is saying, I don't like the narrative that exists because of this.
Yep.
He wants to turn the narrative, and the reason why there isn't a memorial there is because the narrative is this guy represented, and in fact was, represented something that is oppressing and making millions suffer in this country. And he, this is his saying, like, how disgusting that the class war is actually like moving in this direction. And he can't say that. So he makes it about this sort of like second order thing and hides the ball by conflating John Lennon with, Heather Heyer.
Yeah. And just one point on the second order thing. Why are people so surprised that Americans sort of accept a status quo of death? Like, we just had another school shooting yesterday in Wisconsin. Like, people get used to it. The only difference
1.5
here-
million people died in COVID, and it was just sort of like, "Whoa, we had a pandemic, and whoa, why did people respond to it?"
The only dog bites man thing or man bites dog thing going on here is that rich people feel concerned now. Like, that's really the only thing that's different about this story at all, because we are surrounded by killing and death every day.
Because they have never felt concern about a healthcare claim being denied. Like that woman, Breonna Boston, down in Florida, a mother of 3, I believe, who had no guns, who had no record, and was rounded up by the cops because she had a claim denied that she needed, and on the phone she said what the deny, depose, defend, or whatever, and then also said you guys have it coming or something like that. You
people are next.
You people are next. But in our country that has the First Amendment, a threat requires much more specificity, and then that would typically require that kind of arrest.
That could just be advice.
I get rape threats on the internet. Never had somebody like that, the police going after them. I guess I would have had to be a healthcare CEO to call in and make a complaint or something like that. They're trying to send a message. And if this dude wants to, he should go down there and start a vigil for this guy in front of the Hilton if he's that all.
Yeah, go buy some flowers, buddy. Here we go.
Baum and Anthony Huber were shot and killed by Kyle Rittenhouse. Crowds grieve the loss of Helena Hutchins, the cinematographer who was fatally shot on the set of the film Rust. The University of Georgia held a vigil for Laken Riley, a nursing student who was killed by a migrant near campus. And when Donald Trump returned to the site of his first assassination attempt in Butler, Pennsylvania, supporters appropriately honored Corey Comparatore's life and service by placing his firefighter's uniform in the stands. But there was no sign of any makeshift memorial on 54th Street. Instead, a poster was taped outside the Hilton Hotel depicting the suspect as a saint with the words, "Free Luigi," a reference to the 26-year-old charged with second-degree murder.
What? And as a news guy, what does that tell you? We're normalizing something, or maybe we're not normalizing something.
Can you imagine if it was a healthcare CEO that was accidentally hit when the Trump assassination attempt went down?
Oh my God.
People would have reacted probably different than just a firefighter.
It's fascinating. It's fascinating that some of these people say this stuff on television. You know, we can hear you. Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.